And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to be here today for the state of moderation. I was trying to say modern web and automation at the same time. It was terrible. So, modern web's state of automation. We have a really amazing panel of experts here. For those of you watching on YouTube, feel free to post your comments and we'll try to get to all of them. Wanted to give a quick shout out to this.lab. Super excited. This is the sister company of this.media and modern web and all those other fun things that we do related to the community. We're hiring. So if you love development, we're a team of about 50 developers and it's a really amazing place to be. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, welcome. And for Modern Web and this dot, we actually do a lot of really amazing events for the community. So tomorrow will actually be our monthly mentoring for women in tech. We're going to have a voice coach there, kind of talking to everybody about how to be more confident with their voices. We'll also have State of React Ecosystem very soon, in about a month, talking about all the different projects within the React ecosystem. Then we have free trainings, JavaScript Marathon from the 19th through the 23rd. So if you're excited about just educating yourself and doing like free, quick 1-hour trainings, definitely hang out with us and visit javascriptmarathon.com. Then we'll, of course, have our next monthly Women in Tech, monthly mentoring Women in Tech, and then State of UI happens July 27th. So definitely check all of those out. You can find them at this.co, and we hope to see you there. Today, I'm going to be one of your hosts. My name is Tracy. I am a Google developer expert on the RxJS core team, a Microsoft MVP, and also CEO of this.labs. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm always happy to answer whatever questions you have related to anything. And I'm joined by my host, Matthew.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. You can find me on Twitter at MasterPegs. Feel free to message me if you have any questions on anything dev related.
Yes, and we have an amazing set of panelists here today. So we have Zan, who is a developer advocate at Circle CI, Tracy, who is executive director at Continuous Delivery Foundation, also Allison, who is developer advocate at Weaveworks, and Taylor, who is a developer advocate at HashiCorp. So welcome all.
Howdy.
Super excited to have you all, and all of you all are on Twitter, which for those of you in the stream, you should see their Twitter handles right under themselves. So I wanted to go ahead and give the opportunity for everybody to have 5-minute updates really quickly. So starting off with Tracy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks so much. And happy to be here. Yeah, so Continuous Delivery Foundation, for those of you not familiar with it, is an open source community. And our mission is to help improve the world's ability to deliver software with security and speed. We are home to some of the fastest growing projects in the space. So that includes Jenkins, Spinnaker, the platform that came out of Netflix, and Tekton, which originated from Google, and many other projects. After this event, I invite you all to join us next week at our annual event, CDCon, and be part of the conversation where we're driving the future of software delivery for technology teams, enterprise leadership, and open source communities. We have this year a GitOps Summit and a Spinnaker Summit co-located with that event, and we'll be sharing some data around the state of continuous delivery. And yeah, everybody's welcome.
That's exciting. Is there a website where we can find out more information?
Yeah, check out cd.foundation and more information about the community and our conference.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, I was thinking Taylor from HashiCorp could give us a quick update.
Absolutely. So howdy, everyone. My name is Taylor Dolezal from HashiCorp, and really excited as we venture into the summer. If you're looking for a side project or something to look into, Terraform just hit 1.0, so that is quite exciting. That just happened here last week. Feels like, was it needed to think for a second? Felt like it could have been a month ago, a year ago. It was a very long week last week, but very excited to see that go live. One of the other products that I work on is Waypoint. That also went to 0.4. That includes some very fun things like mutable deployments and makes it easier to work with Kubernetes when you have your YAML files and you want to apply those as well. So if you that haven't heard of HashiCorp, we help you in your journey to the cloud. So whether that's infrastructure, application delivery, networking, security, things like that, we have you covered on those fronts. Touch with me. Please at me. I know a lot of people say don't at me, but please at me. I love having those conversations to understand what your stack looks like, how we can make things better, easier, kind of sand off those rough edges, illuminate those dark corners, and just make it a generally much more fun time to work within that space. So happy to be here today. Happy to see what questions y'all have. And I'm stoked.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And now I'll hand it off to Allison from Weaveworks to give a quick update.
Hello, everyone. I'm Allison. I'm a dev advocate over at Weaveworks. So you might have heard of us before. We're a company very focused around GitOps. Recently, we just released a very early release of a tool called Weave GitOps, which is backed by Flux, an open source tool that we founded that's now in the CNCF. So I'll drop a link to that. If you use Flux or Flagger, that's other tools in our space that we've worked on, we've helped build, and that's a little update from me. Thanks.
That's awesome. I love to see companies contributing to open source all the time and new projects coming out and just, helping solve problems. It's amazing to watch and see. Last but not least, Zan from Circle CI.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Zan. I'm a developer advocate at Circle CI. We're a CI/CD provider. Basically, we support companies, large, small, from open source to enterprise to all the different sizes, startups in the middle, on their journey to continuous delivery and making sure that their code ends up being deployed or running actually and with the users. What a couple of news that we currently recently released. One would be the acquisition of a company called Vamp. So they do release automation, not just deployment. And so we're kind of moving the needle towards the release space with everything that comes with it. That's one thing. And we're also continuing to continuously improve our core products with new features. We recently launched things like ARM support, so people can build on our ARM workloads for their ARM services. And also we announced this thing called dynamic config, which really kind of explodes the realm of possibilities of what you can do with your continuous CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment scripts and workflows, essentially. So that's us. Check us out, circleci.com, or reach out to me on Twitter @Zmarken with any questions, suggestions, anything.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much all for the quick little updates. Again, for those of you who have questions, feel free to post them in chat. And Matthew, I'll let you take it away.
Hello again, everyone. As I'm sure we are all aware, the field of automation is continuously evolving. And I was curious to know if there's any common trends in how the field of automation has been evolving over the past year. Could you guys give us maybe an update on any common threads you guys are seeing as we take steps towards evolving the field of automation?
Yeah, I can take that one. So definitely in the last year, the pandemic and remote work, distributed work has been a huge factor. So we're seeing, in the open source and in the wider community, people really leaning into automation as a way to help, not just the distributed work, but also folks are just dealing with a lot of burnout at the moment. We see a lot of that in our community. SREs are under more pressure than ever. And so everyone's sort of saying, okay, how can we fix this and make life better? And a couple of themes we keep seeing coming up, things around developer experience and developer productivity, not just surface level talk, but what does it mean in essence and how can automation help? And then specific technologies, a lot on GitOps. That just seems to be taking off, and a lot of people trying to understand what it means and how they can take advantage of it for modern architectures.
I think I agree with Tracy, and I think it's been interesting to see things like GitHub Actions really come into the forefront and seeing some novel and less novel use cases that people have kind of figured out in ways to use that. As well as kind of being aware of how long it takes to run, whether it be tests, whether it be certain types of processes or builds for people's applications. It was nice to have Jenkins just kind of like sitting there. Whatever plugin you could ever want to use is probably available for it. And it's been nice to see that transition over to something like GitHub Actions, GitLab CI as well, and just kind of like seeing how teams are rethinking their processes now that it's a little bit more, in my opinion, accessible to them to start using as well.
And to add to this, I think we've also just been kind of adding more and more, not just kind of the building and all of that. We've been adding more and more kind of aspects of automation. So like security is obviously a big one, DevSecOps, but also things that's not usually related to kind of software development or is not really been in our space, like machine learning with MLOps. That's like pure automation spiel. RPA and things that like enterprises tend to kind of adopt, but we as kind of software developers or practitioners don't necessarily think about it when we're looking at it. So that's also been just exploding. And lastly, I think on the other side of the spectrum, we're also seeing tools that have become more and more ubiquitous and just like implementable without thinking. If you're building like static websites, you get like deployments or preview deployments, release deployments, like just out of the box with many kind of hosting providers. And I think that's like really exciting because anyone can just start writing something and be using some level of automation with like really without effort.
Yeah, so I same thoughts as Tracy, Taylor, and Zan here, and also definitely like iterating on that. One of the points that Tracy made earlier, like with burnout and the pandemic, we're kind of, automation lets us optimize all these processes that take us a long time, and there's all these long like interaction loops, so that we have like less of heaps of interacting and more quality interactions like with people. So like rather than waiting, oh yeah, can you click the button? We're collaborating and we're making cool stuff.
So for developers kind of getting their feet wet into automation, what would you all think would be some great common best practices that developers can think about when they're trying to start using automation in their projects?
Or are there like guides potentially as well? Like I know there's a lot of there's like well, maybe there's three. There's like this getting started. Okay, I kind of know what I'm doing. Where's the advance to the, okay, give me more, give me the advance. Like, where do people really learn and understand how to go through the process of their journey of like getting into this or increasing their skill set?
Yeah, I would say, like, at a very high level, we have some amazing, well, I always like plugging the Accelerate book by Nicole Forsgren and all, and that's got some amazing capabilities. But what it highlights is that you have to do a lot of different things at the same time well. So it can be tricky, especially if you're working with a pre-existing system. But I think a couple of principles will always apply. And one is just about getting your batch size down. So try and simplify the number of changes and the batch size and just your cycle time. And that's kind of a good kind of rule of thumb of where you can start with and run experiments with tools to see which help you get there.
I agree with Tracy. Just taking that, I don't know overtly of any guides, but I do. What is it? There's a book called Working in Public by Stripe Press. It's an orange book. I have it somewhere in the shelf behind me, and really just takes a good look at open source and some good practices there, and just the different types of projects as well. Because I think that's the most difficult thing with automation is that you can. It's a good general way to sum up things and how to do things without me manually doing them. Right? Is kind of the consensus there, though every project is different. There are a lot of concerns with different projects, and I think that really being mindful of and intentional around what am I trying to do here is something that is really helpful to ask yourself when you're starting, an automation journey, or you're looking to cut out something that might take you a lot of time or a lot of commands by hand, by button push, and getting rid of that is always helpful. Even if you don't expect you might do it again, it's always good to kind of automate that or get that ready so that there's less room for human error and things like that. But I think that just that intentionality of what am I trying to do here, thinking about the end steps and being intentional on solving that in that way, just measuring twice, cutting once type of fashion is always helpful.
There's actually a question in the chat that's probably relevant. I don't know if you saw it, Matthew. You want to ask it?
Yes, from R. Adams. He's wondering what we mean by automation. Do we mean automated builds, automated testing?
I think that's a really good question. I think when it comes to automation, I think I feel like it's a good indicator for you can tell what experience someone has is what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say automation. For me, it's application delivery. It is that application build step, but you don't have to start there. You could take a look at tests. You could take a look at some static checks as well. One of my favorites when I'm working with Terraform is getting a sequence set up where I do a Terraform format, Terraform validate, Terraform init, just as a good static check to make sure everything is as I expect it to be when I'm working with that code specifically. So really, I think when we're talking automation, we're talking about the entire gamut of automation that you're able to do with your code, with your infrastructure, with your pipelines, et cetera.
Yeah, I think I'd like to chime in on that thought there, Taylor. Yeah, when we're talking about automation, like I feel it's very easy to think, automation, we're going to automate deploys, we're going to automate, testing and all that. And then there's like all the other like busy work, like important stuff, like for running open source projects that leverage automation. So things in like the Kubernetes project, the way Kubernetes project uses GitOps to manage Slack channels and all that. So it's not just limited to say like your code. It can also, like, automation can also touch how you manage and interact with your communities. So yeah, that's another little thought there.
We spoke about best practices, but what would you all say are some of the most difficult things to get right in automation?
I have a story. I don't know if this is a cautionary tale or not, but a few years ago, I had joined CloudBees, and I was working with Kosuke Kawaguchi, who's the creator of Jenkins. And one of the shocking things I learned at the time was that Jenkins releases actually had a very manual step to them. So they relied on a laptop in Kosuke's basement, and he had to be in the loop to release. So this was like shock horror. Everybody's using Jenkins to automate stuff, and it's not really automated. And I was like, okay, we've got to fix that. We're going to get it done. And in 3 months, we just got to get rid of that and get some true automation. But I think the reality is like problems tend to be like socio-technical, and you're dealing with people, and you're saying, okay, well, who should be able to release Jenkins, and how do we authorize that, and how do we make it possible that nobody will interfere with that process and people can trust it? And it actually turns out like some problems are just much bigger than you expect when you tackle it. So it definitely took us a lot longer to get there, because it meant we had to bring people together and set up processes. So I think, just never underestimating how challenging it can be, and appreciating that there's two sides to it. There's the technology side, and then there's bringing people along for the journey. But we did get there in the end. So happy that it all cut out single points of failure, and solved it at an open source level.
Well done. That would scare me, having that one laptop be the single point of failure.
Absolutely.
On my from my perspective, by the way, this is like such a cool story, Tracy. From my perspective, one of the hardest things is like if you're starting a new project or like even tinkering and like forcing yourself to like start with like automation from the start, like the first step being having a pipeline set up so that you're set for the future, and not forgetting that, and or not skipping that because what could happen, like this is just a throwaway project, and it's never going to be developed further. So just making sure that yes, do the annoying few steps that are not going to be cool hacking first, and then working on that. But that's like coming from the hacker side of me. The other one is coming from the over optimizer side of me, which is like just at some point you have reached a level of like sufficient completeness that it's good enough, and you're not really getting whatever improvements you make are just not kind of getting you the value that you're kind of putting in by just kind of tweaking and increasing. Obviously, the Pareto principle, 80-20, is very big at play, and just kind of understanding, hey, that's enough. We've got this working. Let's move on and build the cool stuff. And that's two sides of the spectrum that I find like incredibly difficult, or like I find traps.
Do you ever look at projects and say, whoa, too much automation? Like, can there ever be too much automation?
Absolutely. It's absolutely agreed. I think that there's just I like what you said, Zan, around that over optimization, because I feel like I've been on teams where that's the 20% is the focus, not the 80% that is going to move the bar, because that 20% is what's cool or kind of what people want to work on. I think it's really important to be mindful of those traps and kind of steer around them as you can. It's a pothole that will really affect your team if you end up hitting that. I think that some recent things that have happened, and also Tracy, that's an incredible story. That'd be it reminded me of one time where I was working on some iOS builds where before we had these nice things like test flight and this Xcode automation steps. I was working in the healthcare industry. we were creating applications, and we had a MacBook Pro, and it was just that one that was sitting in our office, and it was just really a pain as we went through different updates. You know, one release would come, it would take an additional 20 minutes to build and sign everything. I absolutely feel that pain. I'm happy that we were able to scale up in those respects now. I agree with that being a difficult thing to solve. I think access and just kind of allowing certain people to see certain steps throughout the build is also something that is kind of hard to get right. That's why I like the systems that kind of pull the code together with the process. I feel like that's having that visibility is always something that's important to me. And then something that recently happened with Docker Hub, if y'all haven't seen, is around changing some of those automatically triggered builds and making that a paid feature because crypto miners, which is kind of a bummer. You know, it was why we can't have nice things type of effect. But I feel like that kind of paired in with access and DevSecOps as well, and kind of figuring out what's the right thing to do around, like, how do we validate people? How do we set this up in a way that makes it easy for people, but keeps out people that don't have the best intentions out there?
That's a very good point you made. I read an article the other day with how GitHub Actions had to take some kind of steps to minimize the GitHub Actions because there were a whole bunch of crypto miners just taking advantage of their service. So that's a great point. And it sucks that there's people out there that would take advantage of of services like that. It's a great point.
It's really a bummer. And one more, and I promise, is that one other thing I could think of was the first time that you start your automation journey. I have a couple fun stories where I've worked with teams and they've just started kicking off, you know, GitHub Actions and things like that. You have that monthly allowance at 3,000 minutes or whatever it is, and you'll see that evaporate very quickly if you haven't thought through how you parallelize your jobs and kind of cut down on those times. You can, you know, open up a pull request and submit, you know, 100 commits while you're doing that, or maybe wait and do that later. There are just some interesting thought patterns and architectures around how you run your tests and kind of how they're used. People can always find ways to use the automation in ways that you never even thought of. So that's fun / scary.
Yeah. Oh, and some just further thoughts. Yeah, from the whole complexity. So it's so like easy to get like, I want to build this really awesome system, and you're like getting really invested in it, and then you one day look back and you're like, oh, I have to hand this off to someone else to look after, for someone else to maintain, right? So it's kind of keeping that in the back of your mind as well. Is like, you know, is this going to be easy for someone who might be brand new to get started with it? Is it accessible and applicable to other projects I might have? Yeah.
We had mentioned embedded software earlier in this call, and we have a question from Frank Canova. He asked, have there been any improvements that help do test automation on embedded software projects? I've often found it difficult because it's dependent on also simulating hardware.
I'm going to say my background was actually in the embedded space, and you know, it's a great space. I think there's things like virtual platforms. These days, people can run tests against simulators in that way. And the other thing I've seen recently is just ability to use cloud-connected hardware, so you don't have to have it physically on your desk, but you can access it through services to test it. So I think embedded as well is not being left behind in kind of the automation revolution.
Cool. Yeah, definitely loving all the questions that are coming in via chat. It's definitely very exciting to look at. Matthew, do you have any additional questions, or should I ask one?
Well, I do actually. Like, one
okay,
thing
go ahead.
like, I'm still somewhat new in the automation world, and I'm curious as to what kind of interesting projects you've seen developers have done taking advantage of automation. Like, what are some unique but interesting scenarios that you guys have seen developers come up with to take advantage of automation tools?
I gotta say, I love all of the knowing smiles I just saw from the panel. I think that a huge shout out to the team working on Prow with Kubernetes. The automation around the Kubernetes project and sub-projects and special interest groups, I think, is really awesome. There are numerous talks. I need to get a list together at some point in time, but kind of looking at the architecture of Prow and how it runs, and seeing how it manages and helps people classify pull requests, get them closed, perform different actions on them is really cool, as well as things like /pony party and some other things like that and /honk that might have gotten worked into the tool as well. Definitely encourage you to do some digging on that one.
Yeah, and just building on the Prow theme, Jenkins X, which is like the cloud native version of Jenkins, it uses Prow or equivalent technology, and I remember the great demo they do where you can use that and have sort of chat ops type functionality. So you can have interaction in the pull request, and if you do / commands, it will give you some feedback. And the favorite is always doing like /meow, and then you get a cat gif just for fun in your pull request. So yeah, that one's always a good crowd pleaser.
That's a nice one.
It's fun.
Sorry, outside of the development world, I love the services that check the stock of various gaming websites for you. If you want to get something like a PS5 or Xbox or any of the graphics cards right now, they're doing a service to people, and very much automation at play. Although, yeah, not quite developer tool automation.
A fellow gamer. I like that. Something else I've been wondering, I've kind of been getting into WebAssembly lately. I like the idea that WebAssembly has going on, and I'm curious if there's any movement going on in automation involving WebAssembly, like maybe deploying WebAssembly code.
I personally, I'm just jumping into that as well, and I've seen some interesting use cases like bots for Discord and some other fun use cases like that as people kind of get up to speed with WebAssembly and all the things that it has to offer. I think it's honestly really interesting space. I haven't seen too many things, and I'm digging into that as well. So all that to say, no, I haven't seen anything on that front, but really excited and curious if anyone else has.
I really do wish there was some sort of checklist. Kent Dodds on Twitter yesterday, he was like, here's my current tech stack, right? And he posted Prettier and Remix and this and that and whatever. And I know it's beneficial for, companies, for example, who are thinking okay, what are we doing wrong? How can we improve, to have some sort of, industry standard? Everybody wants an industry standard. I feel like, Tracy, that's your wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, I'd love to say a little bit more, because one of the things we see, certainly when we talk about application delivery automation, it's just so fragmented. It's a good thing. People are innovating, coming up with different solutions, but it does make it really difficult for the users to try and figure out, okay, what can I use? What connects well together? What works with each other and what doesn't? And almost as a response to that, within the Continuous Delivery Foundation, we have some open source groups focused on interoperability and ways to make things work together. And one of the first projects there is going to be around events in Cicd. So sort of saying, can we standardize all the events that come out of a pipeline? And can we just agree as an industry that this is the way we should read and interpret events, so that not each tool is coming up with its own way of talking about the different stages or the way test results are expressed. So yeah, we're looking forward to kind of putting out a roadmap around that and working with different projects and communities. And similar, we're seeing some things with OpenTelemetry, which is becoming de facto standard for telemetry events. And I think what we want to do for events in CI/CD will follow a similar path. So just starting off with kind of de facto standards, so not formalized ones, but ones that are very practical and people can use.
Are there any like good working groups that people can join or listen in on GitHub?
Yes. So we have an interoperability group which looks at the broad picture, and we have a specific one looking at events in CI/CD. And actually, we have like birds of a feather session at CDCon where they'll be giving a bit of an intro to the work being done and inviting people to engage, whether it's on Slack, through GitHub, or whichever community channels. So yeah, looking forward to just those sessions where people kind of try to talk about their work and invite people to join in.
One thing that I'm wondering is, for me, again, I've been dipping my toes into automation, doing a lot of testing and deploying with it. But are there any features that you guys are seeing developers constantly bringing up? Any feature requests for in automation? Do you see any like recurring themes that people want in your products?
Or unsolved problems.
Yes.
Reasons to start another company.
Yeah.
Or open source project.
I see a lot of people saying, please, can we automate security away? We don't want to have to solve it, or, just specific features. And certainly I think we're going to see a lot more about software bill of materials, the idea that you can automate the kind of provenance of where each part of that comes together to build your software. You can tell where that's come from, and you can test its provenance and assure people that there's not been any supply chain hacks or attacks. So yeah, I'd love to see more automation in that space.
I think the biggest one that comes to mind for me is just seeing a lot of platforms, springing up, and, can you please add Next.js? Can you please add Netlify? Can you please add all of these different types of platforms is an interesting one, as well as the M1 Max and ARM64 supports and things like that as well. I just got a Raspberry Pi 4 set up with a 64-bit OS, so I'm going to make a few of those requests as well very soon.
Plus, on top of that, yeah, we've got all these requests for interoperability of this. We've got all these requests because when someone sees, oh, that's a service I use and it's like being supported by this, potential thing that I want to use as well, it makes it much more accessible and approachable. So yeah, things like GitHub Actions, it's like CI, testing, runner, anything within GitHub, which is really powerful.
We do have another question in chat that I wanted to bring up. Again, from Frank Canova. He's curious. There's a lot of Jenkins alternatives these days. Is Jenkins dead?
Oh, I want to take that one. I always think it's like a mark of you've arrived when people start questioning if you're dead all the time. Like we used to get constantly, is Java dead? Is Java dead? It's like, sorry, nothing in software ever dies, folks. Jenkins is going pretty strong, especially underpinning lots of huge enterprises and doing continuous delivery at scale. I think you will see it evolve, especially when it comes to cloud native and how it operates there, and definitely a few innovations coming from the community. Check out Jenkins File Runner and Jenkins Operator, because there's definitely, a different way when it comes to approaching cloud architectures of how you want to think about running Jenkins. But yeah, I'm afraid very, very, very far from dead.
Yeah, Jenkins will never long live Jenkins. Jenkins will never go. It reminds me of the adage, Tracy, that it's typically about software languages, but I feel like it's applicable to most things in life. There are two types of programming languages: the ones everyone complain about, and the ones that no one use.
That's so true. This reminds me of jQuery. That's what this reminds me of. So another question for you all. One thing I'm seeing a lot of in automation is the mentioning of Docker and Kubernetes. How have these technologies influenced the field of automation? And should developers start diving into leveraging these technologies when they're dipping their toes into automation?
I think Kubernetes is, it's become a really good starting. I wouldn't say starting point, but like it's very powerful in the way that, you know, it provides you this really good foundation to start automating and standardizing how you deploy things, rather than you going into the shed, getting some bash scripts, nailing them together, and being like, this is how I deploy things. So yeah, Docker and Kubernetes, like it's just made it so that you can reproduce things. If someone's running that Kubernetes there and you're running the same one, you should be able to take your manifest and deploy it over to their one. Yeah.
I think it's forced to, I mean, it's kind of forced the other way around. If you want to like start using Kubernetes, especially, like it has so many moving parts. It's so complex that it forces you into automating, because without that, you're not going to get anything done. I think that's my thinking anyway.
Yeah, I love this question because, like, for me, Kubernetes is so powerful. Like, it's enabled people to scale, you know, horizontally, to scale vertically, and it forces us to like ask these questions. If we have this almost unlimited compute, how do we approach things differently? You know, do we automate building every PR even before it's checked in? You know, there's all sorts of powerful things we can do, and it feels like in many ways we've just started scratching the surface of that power.
I love those answers. I think that one of the things is the Kubernetes community too is just overall, my opinion is just a really fun place to be. Everyone's got that focus for like, how can we help? You know, when it comes to solving these problems. For me, the Kubernetes, all of the facets to Kubernetes feel like I'm wearing a friendship bracelet and I'm able to match it up with all of the things. I'm like, I need a deployment. Oh, sweet. I can use it over here. I need a way to expose this service. Ingresses. How do we run these things and make it easy for all these teams to use? Helm charts, operator pattern. You know, you have all of these different ways to be able to work with different concerns that you typically have when you work on a project. And I love that it's been like, obviously, you know, it hasn't been completely solved just yet. My dog agrees, but there's always room to grow those things out. But really interesting to see how still being generic, it's able to solve all of those problems that you typically have when you're going about solving a software problem or getting an application deployed.
Also in the space of Kubernetes, it sounds like this subject, Kubernetes, is definitely something that people should be looking at when they're getting into automation. And me, I haven't touched Kubernetes yet, and I'm curious with all of you, what are some great starting points for developers looking to dive into Kubernetes in reference to automation?
I think one of the things that's best to get spun up is a local cluster, and so there are many ways to do that as well. Whether it be Minikube, my personal favorite is the Kind project, Kubernetes and Docker, and friend of the show Ben Elder, I think is a really fun person that works on that project. Really helpful in kind of answering all those questions around how you go and use that. But with just a simple YAML manifest, you're able to spin up a cluster exactly the way that you'd like. And then you can test things against that as well. And you also have that ability to very quickly, you know, if Kubernetes 1.2.1 just came out, you don't have the ability to use that on many of the major clouds right now. you can use kind and be able to and spin something up there and test exactly the features that you want to on that front as well. I think that there's a personal passion for Kubernetes because of adopting that a little bit earlier onto the project too, and I see that in many other people. But by all means, that's not the doesn't have to be the hero end all of everything, but it does provide a lot of good frameworks and thoughts on how you can run your applications, make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'll say projects like Jenkins X try to pull it all together into a great user experience. And I will say, like, the more time goes on, I think the solutions will become simpler because it is pretty challenging to get started with. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot more like services built on top of it, a lot more focus on developer experience, and even serverless platforms, which will just use Kubernetes under the hood, and then folks don't necessarily have to worry about all the nitty gritty. So yeah, really curious to see how that space continues to evolve.
There's clearly a lot of passion here for Kubernetes. Clearly. What are ways that leveraging Kubernetes as opposed to like not, for instance, what kind of problems can they solve? Basically the solution, if it runs anywhere, like it runs on my computer but not yours.
Yeah, I think like part of it is just about having true declarative infrastructure. And I think that becomes an enabler for a lot of things. We reference GitOps, and I know folks at Weaveworks talk about this a lot, but like when we think about automation and infrastructure as code, we've only ever up to now had a kind of surface appreciation of it. And now we can have this kind of true automation thanks to like the declarative nature and the way you can integrate this whole ecosystem. So really just doing things at scale and just automating the heck out of them.
This may go along with in the same vein of can there be too much automation? But are there some things that you all can think of that should not be automated? What are some things that you've seen people automate that you were like, no, that's a bad practice right there?
Yeah, I think anything that falls in the realm of automating, trying to imagine developer productivity, or how often are you sitting at your desk? Anything like trying to track people's work patterns, I think is a serious anti-pattern. So let's automate systems and tools, but keep that barrier between trying to automate too much around things people should do and are good at that aren't necessarily able to be captured by metrics or the tools of today.
Or like automating facial expressions, or automating employee happiness by judging your facial expressions and giving a percentage.
I'm blanking on the title of the book, but I like Adam Grant, how he talks a lot about that. And like he's met with a bunch of big tech companies, and he said that's always what they want to figure out is how do we automate this happiness? How do we automate this this state of mind? And that's 100%. I fully believe that you can't get there. I think that when it comes to documentation, that's something that can kind of get a little bit messy. It can help with that, but I don't think it can solve for that. As well as pull request approvals. Things can get closed out. You can have a pretty high degree of certainty with some things, but it typically always better to have somebody at least checking to make sure everything's all right. I'd kind of worry if I were in on an airplane or something like that, and automated checks look good, and didn't have that final human bit of inspection on that front. I think it's similar to almost to like the Tesla cars, where they're very good for helping you do what you like doing or what you need to do as a human, and just kind of I feel like that's what automation does, is it helps you perform a task in a better way or a more informed way, rather than do it 100% for you in most cases.
I love that you mentioned Tesla. It makes me think of machine learning again in the realm of automation. Have you guys seen any interesting projects involving machine learning or AI in general in automation? I see you nodding your head, Tracy.
Yeah, I'll take it back to kind of application delivery, and I think Zen referenced ML ops, so kind of bringing machine learning into the world of DevOps and making it a first-class citizen. And I think there's the things I find interesting there are things where you can use machine learning to just take away tedious tasks. Like there's some great research on how can you use ML to pick which tests to run against your product, so you're always testing in the most effective way and not taking a really long time to test every single pull request. So using kind of AI or machine learning techniques in your software delivery lifecycle to just automate away some of the toil and make some of the decisions, I think can be super powerful.
I've also seen some, on the topic of testing, like some tools that allegedly I've not used them, but allegedly actually help write your tests. So create some of that for you using machine learning, which is pretty cool in theory.
Sadly, I'm no expert in machine learning, so that's the limit of my ability to ask questions on that subject.
There is one project that comes to mind I thought was kind of cool because lately we've seen an increase in being able to generate transcripts, and the text or the speech to text hasn't been the best. I think a lot of platforms still recognize Terraform as terror form, and hopefully it's not that bad to write. I really hope that. And so as we step through things like that, it is interesting to kind of get I've always been interested in natural language processing and analyzation. Perspective AI is one project I think is kind of cool. It's housed at Google currently, and it looks for toxicity and tone of what someone is saying. So, if somebody's like, "Hey, jerk," you can see that like, it's probably, don't say that. Hopefully people don't need a reminder. That's not the nicest thing to say, but it kind of gives a good look into, is what somebody's intent, what's their tone. It's always easier to do when you talk to someone and interact with them face to face, but it can be a little bit more difficult over text. And this is an interesting project that looks at that, and I find really interesting.
You mentioned Terraform again, and it makes me think of infrastructure as code and Kubernetes. What are some technologies in that area that people should be diving into when they want to get into that kind of space?
So I think there's honestly, I think there's quite a few. Terraform is interesting in that I've seen it used in a few patterns where people will use it to stand up the infrastructure, like Kubernetes, and then they'll use a different tool to actually go and apply things. That's where I think that I think it's good to call that early in your process of like, I'm going to manage these things with Terraform or with this infrastructure as code tool, and kind of delegate, like, let's draw a line in the sand, and let's use Flux, let's use to handle these things and progressive delivery onto our Kubernetes cluster. Let's use Jenkins X, kind of being mindful of where those lines are drawn so that you can appropriately put your puzzle pieces together, I think is always something that's worthwhile to do. There's some really interesting operator patterns as well, and CRDs, custom resource definitions within Kubernetes that allow you to do that as well. And then kind of like making sure everyone can, hand off their baton at each step of the process, if that's the best choice for your workflow and your tool set. Obviously, that's a good one to follow, I found.
Yeah, no, I agree, Taylor. And just picking up the theme of CRDs, I'll fly the flag for the Tecton project, which kind of builds on the CRDs to bring them into the realm of Cicd, and it's fast becoming like the building blocks for continuous delivery solutions on top of Kubernetes. So loads of folks using that to to build their platform. So we've got folks like IBM and Puppet and Google all building on top of Tekton, and even companies like eBay starting to say, okay, if we want to switch to cloud native and Kubernetes and have microservices, Tekton is starting to be kind of one of the platforms supporting that really well.
Yeah, just adding on to like CRDs and operators. It's for those folks who might be like tuning in and might not be fully familiar with this stuff in the Kubernetes world. So CRDs are an object where, they're controlled by objects, operators in Kubernetes. And in these operators, you can kind of define the lifecycle loop for that custom resource. So I have a custom resource called cake, and then my cake operator manages the life cycle of the cake being cooked and all that, and being ready to serve. So in talking back to a software context, you'll have maybe a custom resource that defines maybe a database that you're running. And then you'll have this operator that manages how you might specifically want to bring it up, how you might want to scale it down, and all these other kind of things in the life cycle. That's my little point there.
Thank you very much for that very illustrative way to describe CRDs. That's definitely what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, if we could automate cake creation and slicing for those perfect equal slices, I'd be a huge fan of that.
What's a good way to dive into, like, what are some good CRD resources for anyone looking to just fill their mind with knowledge on them?
So I think Kubernetes docs has like a good section on CRDs. If you want to know about how you can build an operator that manages your own custom CRD, there's lots of really good tools out there for building your own operator. Kube Builder, I think Kudo is another one. And then you can kind of explore kind of some of the example operators people have made, and you can kind of see how it all fits together. I'm a bit more familiar with Kube Builder, and it generates in place kind of a base set of like functions for building that kind of state loop. I'm rambling a little bit here. I'll put some links in the chat.
I look forward to implementing a cake CRD shortly then.
I feel like you are starting to see a lot of those, like, automation related to those types of things, right? Like you have the burger flippers, or I think it's in San Francisco and probably some other places where they have robots flipping burgers for you and making burgers. So everything's fully automated there. You have all these like, $500 to $1,000 machines that will cook the perfect meal for you. You just stick it in and, different layers, and all of a sudden it's magically done. So I don't know, hopefully life gets a little bit easier at some point in time. But, thank you so much all for joining for this. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. Definitely love to see all the movement in the space. And it's so cool to see how, Tracy, you brought up some points of how the pandemic has kind of changed, how people think about this. So that's really exciting too, to again, just see the growth within the industry based on need. So I hope to continue to see that as well. For those of you, again, who are listening, you can see everybody's Twitter handles here. So everybody's so nice and friendly, and I love that about the community. So definitely, check everyone out on Twitter, find them on Twitter, and, I'm sure they're happy to answer questions. And definitely check out the conference next week that Tracy mentioned. I posted that in the chat. It's events.linuxfoundation.org/cdcon. So, sounds like there's going to be a lot of really good, like, birds of a feather sessions there, and probably some great people to talk to about automation. So Thank you again, everyone, for joining for this Modern Web State of Automation, and we hope to see you at some of our other events.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.